Your Honor, this elderly woman clearly doesn't understand the law. The gavel crashes down as Bradley Thompson's voice cuts through the courtroom like a knife. Eleanor Washington sits motionless at the plaintiff's table, her weathered hands folded neatly in her lap. The young attorney slams his leather portfolio on the table and strides toward her, his expensive suit gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He snatches documents from his assistant, dramatically flourishing them in Eleanor's face. With all due respect, ma'am, I don't think someone of your background understands the complexities of Baker v. Westfield. Perhaps I should explain it in simpler terms? The courtroom gasps. Bradley looms over Eleanor, jabbing his finger at the legal documents while loudly over-enunciating each term. He theatrically rolls his eyes toward the jury, pantomiming confusion before turning back to Eleanor. When she opens her mouth to respond, Bradley cuts her off with a dismissive hand wave that nearly knocks over her water glass. "Let me break this down for you," he continues, pacing in a tight circle around her chair like a predator. "The precedent established in this case means your little community center simply doesn't qualify for protection. Do you understand that much?" Eleanor's granddaughter, Olivia, half rises from her chair, face flushed with anger. The bailiff takes a step forward, sensing the building tension. Bradley smirks, adjusting his expensive tie with a flourish as Eleanor grips her cane tightly, her composure remarkable despite the public humiliation. What the arrogant lawyer doesn't realize is that Eleanor Washington holds a secret that will soon shatter his confidence. Eleanor Washington steps out of a modest sedan, leaning slightly on her wooden cane as her granddaughter Olivia helps her with her weathered leather briefcase. The downtown courthouse looms before them, its marble columns gleaming in the morning light. Eleanor straightens her simple but elegant navy dress, squaring her shoulders with quiet dignity. "Are you sure about this, Grandma?" Olivia asks, her voice betraying the nervousness she's trying to hide. At 28, this is her first major case as a lawyer. "We've prepared well," Eleanor replies, patting her granddaughter's hand. "Remember what I always tell you. The law doesn't belong to those who speak the loudest," Olivia finishes with a small smile. They climb the courthouse steps steadily, passing groups of lawyers in expensive suits who barely glance their way. As they approach the entrance, a sleek black town car pulls up. Bradley Thompson emerges, his tailored suit immaculate, designer sunglasses catching the light. His assistant hurries behind him, struggling with multiple briefcases embossed with their prestigious firm's logo. Inside the pre-trial conference room, Bradley notices Eleanor and Olivia arranging their documents. He pauses his conversation with his colleague mid-sentence, eyebrows rising slightly. "Thompson and Associates representing Meridian Development," he announces to the room rather than to them directly, extending his hand to Olivia while barely acknowledging Eleanor's presence. "I don't believe we've met." "Olivia Washington, representing the West Side Community Center," Olivia responds, her handshake firm despite her nerves. "And this is my co-counsel, Eleanor Washington." Bradley's eyes flick briefly to Eleanor before returning to Olivia. "Community Center case, right? The old building on Maple Street?" He chuckles, leaning toward his colleague. "Should be quick and easy." Eleanor steps forward. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to discuss the zoning regulations that—" "Let's save that for the courtroom," Bradley interrupts, speaking over her to address Olivia instead. "Your first major case, isn't it? Bold choice to start with something so ambitious." The court clerk enters, distributing case files. She gives Eleanor a sympathetic look, having noticed Bradley's dismissive behavior. "Good morning, Ms. Washington. Good to see you again." As they take their seats in the courtroom, Eleanor removes a small, worn notebook from her purse. Its pages are filled with meticulous handwritten notes spanning decades. She flips to a specific section, reviews something briefly, then closes it just as Judge Harriet Morris enters the courtroom. Little does Bradley know, Eleanor has been preparing for this moment since before he was even born. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harriet Morris. The courtroom stands as Judge Morris takes her seat, her reputation for fairness matched only by her strict adherence to procedure. She reviews the case briefly before nodding to Bradley Thompson. "Your Honor, Bradley begins, buttoning his jacket as he rises smoothly to deliver his opening statement. He moves to the center of the courtroom with practiced confidence, making eye contact with each juror. Meridian Development represents progress and economic opportunity for our city, he declares, his voice resonating through the room. While we respect emotional attachments to buildings, we cannot allow sentimentality to override sound business decisions and property rights. He paces deliberately, gesturing toward Eleanor and Olivia. The plaintiffs would have you believe that their outdated community center deserves special protection, but the facts and the law clearly support our position that this insignificant property stands in the way of development that would benefit the entire city. Olivia rises for her opening statement, her hands trembling slightly as she arranges her notes. She speaks clearly about the historical significance of the community center, its role as a hub for black businesses since the 1950s, and the discriminatory pattern in Meridian's acquisition practices. Objection, Your Honor, Bradley interrupts. Counsel is making unsupported allegations about my client's business practices. I'm merely establishing context for, Olivia begins. Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to introduce prejudicial. Judge Morris raises her hand. Mr. Thompson, allow Ms. Washington to complete her statement. You'll have ample opportunity to cross-examine. Bradley sits back, whispering audibly to his colleague. This is why these cases are a waste of the court's time. Meridian's first witness, their chief planning officer, testifies about the economic benefits of the proposed development. During cross-examination, Olivia asks about alternative locations for the project. The zoning regulations clearly state that historical significance must be considered when. Olivia pauses, struggling with a technical question about specific zoning designations. Bradley smirks. Perhaps counsel needs a refresher on basic zoning law, he suggests loudly enough for the jury to hear. Eleanor quickly scribbles something on a notepad and slides it to Olivia. Her granddaughter reads it, straightens her shoulders, and asks with renewed confidence, Is it true that your company bypassed the historic designation review process by filing under Section 47B instead of the standard procedure? The witness blinks, caught off guard. I would need to consult our legal team about the specific filing. Bradley's smug expression falters. He glances at Eleanor suspiciously as she sits quietly, hands folded, her expression giving nothing away. When Olivia finishes her questioning, Eleanor raises her hand. Your Honor, I'd like to approach the bench. Bradley immediately stands. Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Washington is not counsel of record on this case. I'd like to request to be added as co-counsel, Eleanor states calmly. Judge Morris reviews the credentials Eleanor presents, her eyebrows rising slightly. Request granted, Ms. Washington. Bradley makes a show of checking his watch and sighing dramatically. Amateur hour, he mutters under his breath as he returns to his seat. A complete waste of billable hours. Eleanor stands, smooths her dress, and approaches the evidence table with the quiet confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times before. Eleanor approaches the evidence table with measured steps, her cane tapping softly against the polished floor. The courtroom watches in curious silence as she arranges her documents with practiced precision. Mr. Daniels, Eleanor addresses Meridian's first witness, her voice calm yet carrying surprising authority. Could you explain the community impact assessment your company conducted before initiating this development project? Objection, Bradley interjects immediately. Relevance. I'm establishing whether proper procedures were followed, Eleanor responds. Overruled, Judge Morris states. The witness will answer. As Eleanor continues her methodical questioning, Bradley interrupts repeatedly with objections, most overruled by an increasingly irritated Judge Morris. Finally, Bradley finds an opening when Eleanor asks about community impact evidence. Objection, Your Honor, Bradley says, rising to his feet with dramatic flair. Inadmissible under the precedent established in Baker v. Westfield. Judge Morris turns to Eleanor. Ms. Washington? Bradley doesn't wait for her response. He strides to the center of the courtroom, buttoning his jacket. If I may, Your Honor, Baker v. Westfield clearly established a framework for admissibility of community impact evidence in zoning disputes. He launches into a lengthy, technically complex explanation, deliberately using obscure legal jargon while maintaining eye contact with Eleanor. The courtroom grows uncomfortable with his transparent condescension. Several jurors shift in their seats, glancing between Bradley and Eleanor. In layman's terms, Bradley continues, emphasizing the phrase while looking directly at Eleanor, community sentiment cannot override documented economic impact in rezoning cases. He pauses, then adds with a patronizing smile, perhaps we should take a moment to explain what precedent means in a legal context, Ms. Washington? Judge Morris begins to intervene, but Eleanor raises her hand slightly, indicating she wishes to respond. The 2008 ruling clearly established this principle, Bradley presses on, his voice growing louder. I can provide simpler reading materials if this is confusing to you. From the gallery, Meridian executives snicker. Olivia's face flushes with anger, but she follows her grandmother's example of remaining composed. Thank you for your thorough explanation, Mr. Thompson, Eleanor says as she stands. May I address your argument? Bradley gestures magnanimously. By all means. In Baker v. Westfield, Eleanor begins, wasn't the community impact evidence ruled inadmissible specifically because it was gathered after the zoning application was submitted? Bradley hesitates. Well, yes, but... And didn't the ruling specifically state that properly conducted community impact assessments completed prior to application would be admissible? That's a simplification of a complex... Page 47 of the ruling, paragraph 3. Eleanor continues calmly. Would you like to review it? I'm quite familiar with the case, Ms. Washington, Bradley responds, his voice tightening. The broader interpretation has been accepted in subsequent rulings. Which subsequent rulings specifically altered this aspect of Baker? Eleanor asks. Bradley cites a case. Eleanor immediately points out a detail he's misrepresented. With each exchange, Bradley grows more flustered, eventually making a claim about the Baker ruling that isn't accurate. I believe you're mistaken on that point. Eleanor corrects him politely. Memory can be unreliable at a certain age, Bradley retorts with a dismissive wave. A murmur runs through the courtroom. Judge Morris leans forward. Mr. Thompson, refrain from personal comments. My apologies, Your Honor, Bradley says insincerely before turning back to Eleanor. Allow me to clarify with the exact language from the decision. He flips through his notes confidently, then quotes from paragraph 215. Community sentiment, regardless of historical claims, cannot supersede properly documented economic benefit analysis when said analysis follows protocol established in Section 47B. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Eleanor says simply. She nods and returns to her seat. Bradley struts back to his table, shooting triumphant looks at the Meridian executives. His shoulders relax as he sits, clearly believing he's demolished her argument and humiliated her in the process. Eleanor leans close to Olivia and whispers something that makes her granddaughter's eyes widen in astonishment. Court is in recess until 2 p.m., Judge Morris announces, tapping her gavel. As the courtroom empties, Olivia paces the small consultation room, her movements sharp with anger. How can you stay so calm? Did you hear how he spoke to you? The way he looked at you? Eleanor sits at the table, her small notebook open before her as she makes precise notes with a fountain pen. I heard every word, felt every look. It's completely unacceptable, Olivia continues, her voice rising. We should file a complaint for his behavior. Eleanor caps her pen carefully. There's a time for complaints and a time for strategy. But Grandma, sit down, Olivia. Eleanor's voice is gentle but leaves no room for argument. When her granddaughter complies, Eleanor takes her hand. Do you remember when I first told you I wanted to be a lawyer? Olivia nods. You were 16. Your teacher told you it wasn't a suitable profession for a black woman. And then in law school, a professor once asked me to serve coffee during a study group. assuming I was the cleaning staff. Eleanor's eyes grow distant with the memory. When I graduated third in my class, a firm partner interviewed me and asked if I could type fast enough to be a good secretary. That's exactly why we should— No, Eleanor interrupts firmly. That's exactly why we shouldn't waste energy on outrage now. I didn't get where I did by demanding respect. I earned it by being so thoroughly prepared that I could turn their underestimation into my advantage. She taps her notebook. Mr. Thompson has given us a gift today. He's shown us exactly who he is and how little he's prepared. Olivia studies her grandmother's face. You knew this would happen. I suspected it might, Eleanor admits. Now I need to make a phone call. Would you mind getting us some lunch? This afternoon will require focus. Once alone, Eleanor removes a slim phone from her purse and dials a number from memory. After 2 rings, a deep voice answers. Judge Washington, the voice greets warmly. It's been too long. Hello, old friend, Eleanor responds. I need a favor. Could you send the complete transcripts and original notes from Baker v. Westfield to the courthouse immediately? Judge Morris's courtroom. A pause. That's quite a blast from the past. Is someone misrepresenting our work? Deliberately, Eleanor confirms. They don't know who they're facing yet. I'll have it there within the hour, the voice promises. Would you like me to include the original draft of your majority opinion with your handwritten notes? That would be perfect, Eleanor says, satisfaction evident in her tone. Thank you, Thomas. Meanwhile, in the courthouse cafeteria, Bradley holds court with his legal team and 2 Meridian executives. He mimics Eleanor's dignified posture to appreciative laughter. Did you see her face when I quoted Baker? Classic, he chuckles, loosening his tie. These community cases always fold after a good scare. They're all emotion, no substance. When Olivia returns with sandwiches, Eleanor explains her plan. As she speaks quietly, Olivia's expression transforms from confusion to astonishment. Are you serious? All this time you never told me that you— It wasn't relevant to your development as a lawyer, Eleanor interrupts gently. I wanted you to find your own path, not walk in my shadow. Just before Judge Morris returns, a courier delivers a sealed envelope to Eleanor. Bradley half rises, about to object to new evidence, but the judge hasn't re-entered yet. Eleanor tucks the envelope into her portfolio without opening it, her expression revealing nothing. They always show their true character when they think they've already won, Eleanor whispers as Judge Morris re-enters the courtroom. Court is back in session, Judge Morris announces, settling into her chair. Mr. Thompson, call your next witness. Bradley buttons his jacket as he stands. Meridian Development calls Dr. Alan Perkins, economic analyst. After being sworn in, Bradley guides Perkins through his impressive credentials. Ph.D. in economics from Princeton, 20 years analyzing urban development projects, published studies on gentrification and economic revitalization. Dr. Perkins, what economic impact would Meridian's development create? Bradley asks confidently. My analysis projects 320 new jobs, $14.2 million in annual economic activity, and approximately $1.7 million in tax revenue, Perkins responds, pointing to charts. The current property generates negligible economic benefit by comparison. During cross-examination, Olivia struggles to undermine his credentials. Bradley objects repeatedly to her questioning techniques. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness, Bradley interjects smugly. After several difficult minutes, Olivia glances at Eleanor, who nods slightly. No further questions. My co-counsel would like to continue the cross-examination. Bradley sighs audibly. This should be entertaining, he whispers. Eleanor approaches slowly, her cane tapping a steady rhythm. Dr. Perkins, good afternoon. In your economic impact calculation, what multiplier did you use for indirect job creation? Perkins blinks, surprised by her technical precision. We used a standard 1.8 multiplier. I see. And that's based on the Henderson-McHale model from 2018, correct? Yes, that's right, Perkins responds, his tone shifting slightly. Interesting choice, Eleanor comments mildly. Did you consider that the Henderson-McHale model was specifically designed for suburban development, not urban renewal projects? Eleanor continues her questioning, each inquiry more precisely targeted than the last. She asks about specific economic formulas, statistical models, and methodological choices that gradually reveal inconsistencies in Perkins's analysis. Objection! Bradley nearly shouts. Ms. Washington is clearly confused about basic economic principles. Watch your tone, Mr. Thompson, Judge Morris warns. Objection overruled. Bradley apologizes to the judge but adds under his breath, it's not her fault she doesn't understand how the modern economy works. The court reporter glances up, having caught the comment. Eleanor continues as if she hasn't heard, asking Perkins about a specific formula used in his projected tax revenue calculations. We used the standard Grayson formula, Perkins explains with renewed confidence. Could you write that formula for the court? Eleanor requests. When he does, Eleanor studies it briefly. Dr. Perkins, you've made an error. You've used the commercial property variable for the third term, but for mixed-use development you should have used the residential adjustment factor. Perkins examines his own equation, color draining from his face. That's a minor oversight. According to my calculations, Eleanor continues, this minor oversight inflates your tax revenue projections by approximately 24%. Would you agree? Before Perkins can respond, Bradley jumps to his feet. Your Honor, I'd like to redirect. As Bradley scrambles to rehabilitate his witness, Eleanor quietly removes a document from the mysterious envelope. Bradley redirects his witness with forced confidence. Dr. Perkins, even with adjustments to the formula, would the development still represent a significant economic improvement over the current use of the property? Absolutely, Perkins affirms. Even with conservative estimates, we're looking at triple the economic activity and job creation. When Eleanor and Olivia present their case, they call Dr. James Harrington, a community historian who testifies about the cultural significance of the West Side Community Center. This building has served as a hub for black entrepreneurship since 1953, Harrington explains. It housed the first black-owned bank in the city, provided office space for civil rights attorneys during desegregation, and currently supports 27 small businesses primarily owned by neighborhood residents. Bradley's cross-examination is aggressive and dismissive. Dr. Harrington, isn't it true that the building has no architectural significance? The cultural impact is more significant than a simple yes or no will suffice, Bradley interrupts. Does the building have recognized architectural importance? Is it on the National Register of Historic Places? No, but, and isn't it true, Bradley continues, cutting him off, that historical significance without architectural distinction is insufficient grounds for protection, as established in Williams versus Metropolitan Development? Eleanor calmly stands. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is mischaracterizing the Williams case. Bradley turns, eyebrows raised. I assure you I'm quite familiar with Williams versus Metropolitan Development. The 2012 ruling clearly established that historical significance without architectural distinction cannot prevent rezoning for economic development. Your Honor, Eleanor explains, Williams vs. Metropolitan specifically distinguished between general historical association and documented cultural significance. The former is insufficient alone, but the latter, which is precisely what our witness is testifying to, was explicitly protected under the ruling. If I may approach with the relevant documentation? Eleanor asks. Objection, Bradley interjects quickly. This appears to be an attempt to introduce new evidence mid-testimony. Judge Morris considers briefly. What documentation are you referring to, Ms. Washington? The actual text of the Williams ruling, Your Honor. Overruled, Judge Morris states. You may approach. Eleanor presents the document. Bradley examines it, his confident expression faltering momentarily. This section specifically distinguishes between general historical association and documented cultural significance with ongoing community function, Eleanor indicates. Bradley quickly recovers. Your Honor, Ms. Washington is quoting from an outdated version of the case notes. I'm quite certain this citation is correct, Eleanor responds calmly. Bradley's face reddens slightly. With all due respect, memory issues might be at play, given Ms. Washington's age. Judge Morris's expression hardens. Mr. Thompson, that comment is entirely inappropriate. You will apologize to Ms. Washington immediately. My apologies, Bradley says stiffly, clearly not meaning it. He turns away, whispering to his colleague, "We need to find a way to discredit the old lady during the next recess." The court reporter's fingers pause briefly over her stenotype, having clearly heard his comment. As the session ends for the day, Eleanor's phone vibrates with a text message that makes her smile for the first time since the trial began. Morning light streams through the high courtroom windows as day 3 begins. Bradley Thompson arrives with reinforcements. Harold Blackwell, the senior partner from his firm, sits prominently in the gallery. Bradley's posture straightens under his mentor's watchful eye, his movements more deliberate. Meridian Development calls Robert Jeffries, City Planning Department, Bradley announces confidently. Jeffries testifies that the community center fails to meet current building codes on 17 different points, from electrical systems to accessibility requirements. What would remediation costs be? Bradley asks. Conservative estimates put necessary renovations at $2.4 million, Jeffries responds. Funds that would burden taxpayers unnecessarily. During cross-examination, Olivia challenges these assessments, questioning whether a gradual compliance plan could be implemented. Bradley objects repeatedly to her questions, making her increasingly hesitant. Eleanor observes this dynamic, then reaches for her legal pad. "May I?" she asks her granddaughter quietly. Olivia nods, relieved, and Eleanor rises. Bradley immediately interjects. "Your Honor," he says with exaggerated patience, "perhaps we could save time if Ms. Washington would allow qualified legal counsel to handle the questioning." Judge Morris leans forward. "Mr. Thompson, that remark is inappropriate and unprofessional. Consider this your final warning." Eleanor begins her questioning. "Mr. Jeffries, when did you personally inspect the community center building?" Jeffries hesitates. "I reviewed the structural assessments prepared by our department." "So you haven't personally visited the site," Eleanor clarifies. "No, but that's standard procedure." Eleanor systematically reveals that Jeffries has based his testimony on outdated plans and reports, never having physically visited the building he's condemning. Finally, Bradley stands. "Your Honor, while Ms. Washington's points about recent cosmetic improvements are noted, they don't change the fundamental compliance issues. As established in Baker v. Westfield, code compliance supersedes historical designation when public safety is concerned." He reads from his notes with exaggerated clarity. "When matters of public safety as defined by current municipal code are demonstrably at issue, historical designation must be considered secondary to compliance requirements, particularly when the cost of remediation would require public funding." Bradley glances at Eleanor as if checking whether she's following. "This precedent is absolutely clear and unambiguous on this matter." Eleanor waits until he finishes. "May I respond to the precedent cited, Your Honor?" "By all means," Bradley gestures grandly. "Mr. Thompson has quoted accurately from Baker v. Westfield," Eleanor acknowledges. "However, he's omitted the subsequent paragraph that creates an exception for buildings with cultural significance if renovation plans are already underway. Exactly the situation with our community center." Bradley quickly recovers. "The exception Ms. Washington references doesn't apply in this case because, as established in the Turner Amendment to the original ruling, the renovation plans must have secured full funding prior to the development application, which the community center has not done." His voice carries absolute certainty as he looks directly at Eleanor, daring her to challenge him further. Eleanor's eyes narrow slightly. This is the moment she's been waiting for. "There is no Turner Amendment to Baker v. Westfield, Mr. Thompson," Eleanor states calmly. The courtroom falls silent. Bradley's confident smile freezes on his face. "Ms. Washington," he responds with forced patience, "the Turner Amendment to Baker v. Westfield is well-established legal precedent. Perhaps in your day things were different, but modern property law is quite clear on this matter." Eleanor's voice remains measured, but carries throughout the now silent courtroom. "I know with absolute certainty that no such amendment exists, Mr. Thompson." Bradley laughs dismissively, turning to Judge Morris. "Your Honor, this is precisely why emotional attachments shouldn't factor into legal proceedings." "I know this," Eleanor continues, her voice gaining strength, "because I was the lead counsel on Baker v. Westfield, and I personally wrote the majority opinion when I served on the state Supreme Court." The courtroom erupts in gasps and murmurs. Bradley freezes mid-gesture, his mouth slightly open. Judge Morris leans forward. "Order," she says, though not loudly. The room falls instantly silent. Eleanor reaches into her portfolio and removes several documents. "Furthermore, I chaired the legislative committee that drafted the Historic Preservation Act that Mr. Thompson has repeatedly misquoted throughout these proceedings." She hands the documents to the court clerk, who delivers them to Judge Morris. They include her credentials, photographs of Eleanor receiving legal awards, newspaper clippings about landmark cases she argued and later presided over during her distinguished legal career. "Before I opened the community center," Eleanor continues, her voice steady and clear, "I spent 4 decades practicing law, including 12 years on the state Supreme Court. I stepped down 5 years ago to focus on giving back to my community." Bradley stares at the documents, his face draining of color. "I wasn't aware of your background, Your Honor. I mean, Ms. Washington." Eleanor meets his gaze directly. "You weren't aware because you chose not to research who you were facing in court. You saw an elderly black woman and made assumptions about my capacity and knowledge." Judge Morris studies the documents before her. "Justice Washington, may I ask why you didn't disclose your credentials at the beginning of these proceedings?" "I wanted our case judged on its merits, not my reputation," Eleanor explains. "However, Mr. Thompson's continued misrepresentation of legal precedents I helped establish made it necessary to clarify the record." Bradley attempts to recover. "Justice Washington, I sincerely apologize for my misconduct. Had I known of your distinguished career—" "That's precisely the problem, Mr. Thompson," Eleanor interrupts gently. "Your behavior shouldn't change based on my credentials. Every person who enters a courtroom deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their background." Bradley falls silent, having no response. His junior associate slides away slightly, creating physical distance between them. "I don't share this to embarrass Mr. Thompson," Eleanor addresses the court, "but to ensure the court has accurate information. The law exists to protect everyone equally, regardless of economic power or social standing." Ciao. As Bradley struggles to regroup, Eleanor slides one final document across to Olivia, evidence that will change the entire direction of the case. Judge Morris clears her throat. "In light of these developments, we'll take a 15-minute recess. Counsel, please approach the bench before we resume." As the courtroom stirs, Eleanor remains seated, her posture as dignified as ever. Bradley Thompson stands frozen for several seconds before his senior partner, Harold Blackwell, approaches and grips his elbow firmly. "Outside, now," Blackwell mutters through clenched teeth. In the hallway, Blackwell's controlled fury is evident in his rigid posture. "You mocked a former state Supreme Court justice? The Justice Washington? The author of the Historic Preservation Act?" "I had no idea," Bradley begins. "Because you didn't do your basic due diligence," Blackwell hisses. "Her picture hangs in our firm's conference room, for God's sake." Inside the courtroom, Olivia examines the document Eleanor has given her. Her eyes widen.
"Grandma, where did you get this?"
I've had contacts in real estate records for decades, Eleanor replies quietly. Some patterns are only visible when you know where to look. When court resumes, the atmosphere has fundamentally changed. Bradley returns with Blackwell now seated beside him at the defense table. Bradley's earlier confidence has evaporated. He sits stiffly, his face pale. Olivia presents the document Eleanor provided, a meticulously compiled record showing that Meridian Development has systematically targeted historically black-owned properties throughout the city over the past 5 years, offering them significantly less than market value while paying premium prices for similar properties in predominantly white neighborhoods. These acquisitions were conducted through 7 different shell companies, Olivia explains, displaying a chart. But all led back to Meridian Development. The pattern becomes clear when viewed comprehensively. During the next recess, the corporate team huddles in intense discussion. Bradley stands awkwardly at the periphery, clearly sidelined as Blackwell takes control of the conversation with the Meridian executives. When court resumes, Blackwell stands. Your Honor, we request a sidebar conference with opposing counsel. At the bench, Blackwell speaks in hushed tones. Meridian is prepared to withdraw their development application for the community center property. That's no longer sufficient, Eleanor responds calmly. The evidence suggests a pattern of discriminatory practices that extends beyond our single property. Your Honor, Blackwell addresses the court. We request a 48-hour recess to explore settlement options. Judge Morris grants the request. As the courtroom clears, news of Eleanor's identity and Bradley's behavior spreads through the courthouse. Several judges stop by to greet their former colleague. 2 days later, all parties reconvene in Judge Morris's chambers. Meridian Development, represented now primarily by Blackwell with Bradley in a clearly diminished role, offers a comprehensive settlement. First, they will abandon their claim on the community center and donate $500,000 toward renovations. Second, they agree to an independent audit of all their development practices. Third, they will establish a community advisory board with real authority to review and influence future projects. Fourth, they commit to funding apprenticeship programs for minority contractors. Eleanor reviews the terms carefully before looking up. There's one additional condition. Eleanor's final condition targets not Meridian Development, but Bradley Thompson himself. 2 weeks later, Bradley Thompson sits stiffly before the State Bar Association's disciplinary committee. The hearing room's austere wood paneling creates an atmosphere of solemn judgment. Bradley adjusts his tie nervously, a far cry from the confident attorney who had strutted through Judge Morris's courtroom. Beside him sits his own counsel, Martin Rivera, a specialist in professional ethics cases. Across the room, Eleanor Washington sits composed in the witness section, accompanied by Olivia and several community members. The committee chair, Judge Rosalind Peters, calls the hearing to order. We're here to address the ethics complaint filed by former State Supreme Court Justice Eleanor Washington against attorney Bradley Thompson. The clerk reads the charges. Conduct unbecoming an officer of the court, deliberate misrepresentation of legal precedent, and demonstrating bias against a party based on age and race. Eleanor testifies clearly about Bradley's conduct throughout the Meridian Development case. Mr. Thompson repeatedly misquoted and mischaracterized legal precedents, she testifies. When corrected, he suggested my age affected my memory. He fabricated a non-existent Turner Amendment to bolster his argument, and when challenged, doubled down rather than verifying his citation. When Bradley is called to testify, he begins with a clearly prepared statement about his commitment to ethical practice and his regret over any misunderstandings that occurred. Halfway through, he stops abruptly, looking directly at Eleanor for the first time. He sets aside his prepared remarks. I can't continue with this pretense, Bradley says, his voice quieter but more authentic. The truth is, I saw an elderly black woman and immediately assumed she was legally unsophisticated. I never bothered to research opposing counsel because I didn't believe she merited that basic professional courtesy. The committee deliberates before rendering their decision. Judge Peters addresses Bradley directly. Mr. Thompson, your conduct represents a serious breach of professional ethics. The fact that you directed this behavior toward a former Supreme Court justice shows remarkably poor judgment, but the truly troubling aspect is that you would treat any person this way. The committee's sanction is announced. Bradley is suspended from practice for 6 months. He must complete 200 hours of ethics training and 400 hours of community service at Eleanor's Community Center. Additionally, upon reinstatement, he will be supervised by a senior attorney for 1 year. As the hearing concludes, Bradley approaches Eleanor in the hallway. Unlike his previous apology, he makes no excuses. Justice Washington, I am truly sorry. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because of how I behaved toward another human being. I failed as an attorney and as a person. Eleanor studies him for a long moment. Mr. Thompson, apologies matter less than changed behavior. I'll see you at the community center where you'll have the opportunity to learn about the neighborhood and people you so readily dismissed. Bradley nods, understanding the path before him. I'll be there. 6 months later, Bradley arrives for his first day of community service, unaware that Eleanor has designed a specific program just for him. The Eleanor Washington case, as it becomes known in legal circles, sparks a seismic shift within the state's legal community. The State Bar Association convenes a special committee to address bias in legal proceedings, with Eleanor invited as honorary chairperson. We must examine not just overt discrimination, but the subtle biases that permeate our profession. Eleanor addresses the committee's first meeting. What happened in that courtroom wasn't an isolated incident, but a symptom of systemic issues. Law schools add the case to their professional ethics curriculum. Eleanor receives invitations to speak at prestigious programs, often bringing Olivia to discuss intergenerational approaches to advocacy. My grandmother taught me that legal knowledge alone isn't enough, Olivia tells a packed auditorium of law students. Justice requires recognizing the humanity in everyone who enters a courtroom. Meanwhile, Meridian Development undergoes its own transformation. Following the settlement, the corporation implements the promised reforms, creating a genuinely representative community advisory board. We've restructured our entire approach to community engagement, Meridian's new chief community officer explains to business reporters. Our previous model prioritized efficiency over inclusion, which ultimately proved neither efficient nor effective. Bradley Thompson, having completed his suspension period, returns to legal practice a changed man. His experience at the community center exposed him to perspectives he'd never considered during his meteoric rise through corporate law ranks. Working with the center's legal clinic showed me how many people struggle to access the justice system I navigate so easily, Bradley admits during a bar association panel. I saw firsthand how intimidation tactics like the ones I used create barriers to justice. He begins offering pro bono services to community members facing housing issues, leveraging his expertise in property law to help, rather than hinder. A leading legal journal publishes an in-depth analysis of the case, highlighting how implicit bias can undermine the justice system even among well-educated professionals. The article includes anonymous interviews with attorneys who recognize similar behaviors in themselves. Olivia's law practice grows as she becomes known for her work at the intersection of property law and civil rights. She hires 2 associates and moves to larger offices, specializing in cases involving community development and historic preservation. Eleanor uses her renewed public platform to advocate for reforms in legal education. Technical knowledge without cultural competence creates lawyers who may win cases but fail justice, she testifies before the state's Judicial Education Committee. 1 year to the day after their courtroom confrontation, Eleanor receives an unexpected request from Bradley Thompson that will test her commitment to second chances. Spring sunshine streams through the newly restored stained glass windows of the West Side Community Center. A vibrant crowd fills the main hall for the grand reopening celebration. The historic building has been beautifully renovated, its original architectural details preserved while modern amenities have been seamlessly integrated. Eleanor Washington stands near the refreshment table, accepting congratulations from neighbors and community members. At 73, she remains a commanding presence, her silver hair arranged in a neat bun, her posture impeccable as she leans lightly on her cane. "Justice Washington," a voice calls from behind her. Eleanor turns to find Bradley Thompson approaching, looking markedly different from the arrogant attorney of a year ago. He's dressed more casually in a button-down shirt and slacks, his former slick confidence replaced by a more genuine demeanor. "Mr. Thompson," Eleanor acknowledges him with a slight nod. "I see you've been helping with the computer literacy program." "Yes," Bradley confirms. "I've been teaching basic legal research skills to the high school students." Over the past months, Bradley has become a regular volunteer at the center, initially serving his mandated community service hours, but continuing even after fulfilling his obligation. "I have something for you," Bradley says, extending a formal envelope. "It's a request, for your consideration." Eleanor opens it to find a letter requesting her mentorship as Bradley refocuses his career on community advocacy law. The letter is thoughtful, acknowledging the unusual nature of the request given their history. She studies him thoughtfully. "Why me, Mr. Thompson?" "Because you understand that true change isn't measured in grand gestures," Bradley answers. "You've shown me that it's the daily choices we make, how we treat people, especially when there's nothing to gain, that define who we are as professionals and as human beings." Eleanor considers his request. Mentorship is a privilege to be earned through consistent action, not granted based on a single moment of clarity. "I'll meet with you monthly, beginning next week. We'll see where it leads." Across the room, Olivia welcomes visitors to the center's new legal clinic. Her practice has flourished over the past year, gaining a reputation for effectively protecting vulnerable communities from predatory development. Later, as the celebration continues, Olivia finds a quiet moment with her grandmother on the center's newly restored rooftop garden. The city skyline stretches before them, bathed in sunset colors. "Do you ever regret not revealing your credentials immediately in court?" Olivia asks. "It might have spared us Bradley's condescension." Eleanor smiles, watching the sunset. "Sometimes people need to confront their own assumptions to truly learn from them. Had I announced my background from the start, Bradley might have treated me differently, but he wouldn't have changed. Now he's had to question not just how he treated me, but how he approaches everyone." She rests her hand gently on Olivia's. "True justice isn't just about winning cases, dear one. It's about transforming the systems that make such cases necessary. Respect isn't something to be demanded based on credentials. It's something to be extended to every person regardless of appearance or status." If you enjoyed this story of justice served and powerful revelations, make sure to subscribe to Beat Stories right now. We bring you the most satisfying tales of underestimated people getting the respect they deserve. Hit that like button if you felt that moment of sweet vindication when Eleanor revealed her true identity. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss our new uploads every Tuesday and Friday. Each story on Beat Stories delivers that perfect blend of tension, justice, and life-changing moments that will leave you feeling inspired.
Every time someone stands up, speaks out, or refuses to be erased, a new story is born. At Beat Stories, we archive that courage. Subscribe now and help us keep these moments alive, because the more we share them, the harder they are to ignore.